Welcome to the Eversio Experience podcast. I am Brandi Garden and I am here with Dr. Desiree Caruso. And this is our 6th episode of the Eversio Experience podcast today. And we are diving into a topic that is critical yet often overlooked: mushrooms for men's health. And whether you are tuning in today for yourself, your partner, or a loved one, this episode is really going to be packed with valuable information that might surprise you and will definitely help you understand just how different men and women truly are. Despite what we hear sometimes, no, we're all the same. We really are different when it comes to our health and our wellness, and that's what we're here to discuss. So obviously, we are women, if you didn't know. We aren't men. So you might be thinking, what the heck are we doing talking about men's health? And the truth is that we both really have some incredible men in our lives whose health and wellness is of great importance to us. So the topics that we're going to discuss today come up quite a bit in our day-to-day lives. They are the discussion around the office. You know that our CEO is the only male working, the only man working here with us at Eversio Wellness, and we care about him deeply. And there are lots of other men in our lives as well. So things like heart disease and cancer and diabetes and respiratory diseases, sexual and reproductive health, and for sure, men's mental health are things that are a regular part of the discussion.
If you haven't already heard our previous episodes, you can go back and hear our personal health stories and the beginning of the Eversio experience in podcast episode 1, all about mushrooms and brain health in episode 2, mushrooms for hormones in episode 3, mushrooms for the immune system in episode 4. If you're interested in including mushrooms as part of your cyclical living lifestyle, we share a detailed protocol for that in episode 5. So if you want to keep learning about mushroom wellness with us, please subscribe, follow, and rate this podcast so that you won't miss the next episode, and we would very, very much appreciate that.
Okay. So, as you know, Desiree is a licensed naturopathic doctor, and she is going to share some really awesome research with you today. I'm not a doctor or a scientist, just a mushroom nerd, and I love to talk a lot. But I do have some very special men in my life that have allowed me to take a pretty deep dive into the world of men's health simply through my love for them and wanting to keep them well. So who are these men that I speak of? Well, I have a dad. As we all do. I came from a male, half of that equation. I have a father-in-law. I have 2 biological uncles and many honorary uncles. You know who you are. I have a husband. I have a son. I have 2 nephews, 3 brothers-in-law, and many good friends who are men. So near and dear. I think that I'm going to dedicate this episode to each of them today and send out wishes to them for good health for the remainder of their lifespans. And I hope you are listening. You know who you are. Amongst these guys in my life, we have 3 cancer survivors, 2 cases of high blood pressure and high cholesterol, 1 instance of kidney disease, 1 autoimmune disease, 1 case of type 2 diabetes, 1 case of Crohn's disease, 1 case of COPD, a few poor diets, more than a few cases of obesity, a little excessive alcohol and tobacco use, and some really difficult mental health conditions. This is not something we can ignore anymore. If I did that same thing about women in my life, the list would look really different. So It's not that men have worse health, they just have different health. And I think it's not something that we discuss enough because women are more likely to talk about our health and to talk to others about our health, even if it's going to see a male doctor. So I'm really excited to report from hormonal balance and respiratory health to cognitive function and cardiovascular care, functional mushrooms can offer a proactive, natural approach to men's well-being. And I hope that those of you listening will be able to take some of the information we're going to share with you and use it to make your life or someone else's a little bit better. So I thought, let's dive in with a question today. Because as we started to prepare, I thought, what is it that really makes men and women different? Because we are so alike in so many of the ways that we experience in our day-to-day lives. We're human. We all come from love. We all have emotions and feelings that really aren't different. So it's the physiological differences that we're talking about here. And that really starts with the beginning of life and the chromosomes. So if you didn't know, men typically have 1 X and 1 Y chromosome, where women have 2 X chromosomes. So that means in the creation of human life, women are always going to give the X because it's all we have to give, where men are either giving an X or a Y, and that means it is men who determine the sex of a baby. So that's a pretty big deal. Like, good job, guys. You are deciding what that baby will be on that exciting day. When a man and a woman come together to reproduce, that woman is she's always the X, and the man is determining the sex of the baby. So the chromosomal differences lead to the development of male and female sex organs in that baby, and therefore the production of different hormones. So the chromosomes are the start. We are different. That is science. We can't deny it. There are some chromosomal differences out there and all kinds of things that make us not always purely XX or XY, but that's the basic. Then we get to the hormones, and I think this is the beginning of where we really start to see how we feel differently in those two sexes. So there's actually no such thing as male hormones. Men and women have the same hormones in their body. It's where in the body these hormones are produced, their concentrations in the blood, and the way that they affect the body, which are different in males and females. So while men do make progesterone and estrogen, it's their testosterone levels that are much more significant. And it's estimated that on average, men have 15 to 20 times more testosterone circulating in their bodies than women. And that's why there's the big difference right there. When we talk about a man's cycle, we're talking about his testosterone cycle, where when we talk about a woman's cycle, we're often talking about the menstrual cycle. So men actually experience a full testosterone cycle every 24 hours. Now, girls, you know that we're getting that once in a 28-day cycle, right? When it's that full moon or when you are ovulating, that's when you have the most testosterone. That's when you would feel most like what we can imagine men might feel like regularly. But men are going through that every 24 hours, which I think is kind of cool. It's going to peak and trough throughout the day for them, and that can affect their mood and their attitudes and their behaviors. But it reaches its peak in early morning and then starts to decrease steadily after 9 a.m. throughout the day. And I thought, I live with a man, and yeah, we wake up together. He can't wait to work out and get going on the day, and he's in attack mode. And then after the workout and the coffee and the morning emails, I start to see that dip. So now that I'm understanding his hormones, I can relate why we approach our mornings so differently. It just makes sense. Interestingly, men over the age of 45 have less testosterone than younger men, and they also tend to have steadier testosterone levels throughout the day without that morning spike. So this is changing through their lifetime. Again, another cycle. It doesn't just stay the same forever. And then lastly, the physical characteristics. So I think we see, because of their higher testosterone levels, we're seeing this contribution to generally greater muscle mass. Now, that's not every man and woman. I know some strong ass women out there. But in general, we see this testosterone offering this greater muscle mass, larger and denser bones, and more body hair, and in more places. And thank goodness we do not have that, because that's a lot of hair to manage in a lot of places. And funny enough, the place that a lot of men want to have hair on their head, we see far more bald men than bald women showing up. And obviously that is happening because of these hormones. So testosterone also giving us differences in skin. We know that a man's skin is about 25% thicker than women's skin. So women, if you're wondering why your husband has this great skin all of the time, it's the testosterone. It's why we, during that ovulation period, might show up with some great skin. And then in the brain, while women have a larger hippocampus and prefrontal cortex, which makes them more detail-oriented by nature, men have a larger amygdala. And we think that this could be responsible for their stronger ability to process threats. And it's no wonder that's come through evolution. So due to these differences, it makes sense that we experience life and we experience health very differently. And simply put, men's health issues because of this are diverse. But certain conditions and concerns are particularly prevalent. And today we're going to talk about the top 5 health issues affecting men in North America, starting with heart disease. And interestingly, heart disease is the leading cause of death for both men and women, but it affects them very differently. So according to the American Heart Association, about 1 in 3 men and about 1 in 3 women will develop heart disease in their lifetime. That's huge. A third of us will have heart disease, but men tend to develop heart disease at a younger age compared to women. For instance, men in their 50s are more likely to have heart disease than women at the same age, who generally, we will see that significant increase show up after menopause. So we're not going through it at the same time. So Desiree, let's talk about heart disease in men, and let's talk about how mushrooms can help us with the prevention or the treatment of that.
Absolutely. So when we think of heart disease, I think it's really important that we talk about cholesterol levels because most often we are treating high cholesterol levels so that we can mitigate cardiovascular risk. So oxidative stress, and we've talked about oxidative stress before, it's that cellular stress from free radicals and things like that. So oxidative stress and high cholesterol levels have been linked to an increased risk for the development of cardiovascular disease, both of which are more common in men. So lowering the serum cholesterol levels coincides with a decreased risk of developing atherosclerosis. Atherosclerosis is the buildup of fats, cholesterol, and other substances on artery walls, and this buildup is also known as plaques. So these plaques can cause arterial narrowing, they can block blood flow, or they may separate and lead to a clot in severe cases. So overall, preventing atherosclerosis protects against the development of cardiovascular disease and can help to improve quality of life and longevity. So we'll talk about a few different functional mushrooms that can be supportive of preventing and mitigating risk for cardiovascular disease. And specifically, a lot of the research is looking at cholesterol levels because that is a risk factor for cardiovascular disease. So this one study found that reishi was able to lower plasma levels of total cholesterol and LDL cholesterol. LDL cholesterol is known as quote unquote bad cholesterol, while simultaneously increasing levels of HDL cholesterol or good cholesterol. So oftentimes individuals who need to be treated to lower their cholesterol levels to mitigate risk, they oftentimes will have lower levels of this good cholesterol and higher levels of this bad cholesterol. So if we can treat in a way where we're lowering the bad and then increasing the good cholesterol, then we're at a place where we can help to mitigate that risk. So reishi exhibited the potential to ameliorate cardiovascular disease due to its antioxidant as well as hypercholesterolemic effects. So cool. Now, not only reishi, there's a couple other functional mushrooms that we don't necessarily talk about a lot or have not talked about extensively yet. Research also shows that maitake, shiitake, and reishi can improve lipid profiles by directly acting on a mechanism that controls cholesterol transport and excretion. So it's also acting as antioxidants and reducing this lipid peroxidation. Lipid peroxidation is when lipids degrade within that cell membrane, which can lead to cell damage and death. So oxidative stress and hypercholesterolemia, as I mentioned, are linked to an increased risk of development of cardiovascular risk factors. So the fact that they can, in this study, it was found to act on that exact mechanism to control the cholesterol transport and excretion is awesome and it's amazing. And that's where these cholesterol pharmaceutical medications like statins, that is what, it's impacting. So that was fantastic.
And I think that so 2 of our blends, the 4 mushroom blend and the 6 mushroom blend, have both shiitake and maitake in them. And in the beginning of those formulations, we were really questioned on those 2 ingredients because they're food. Shiitake is something that we buy in the grocery store and eat at dinner regularly. And maitake is this beautiful culinary delight that we see on the menus of restaurants here in Vancouver all of the time now. So why are we providing these as a supplement or as what we like to think of as functional medicine? And now you know why. So they are not popular. We don't often see shiitake on its own in a capsule. We don't often see maitake alone, but I think we will as this research continues to. But that's why you see them as these, I think of them as the supporting cast alongside reishi or alongside lion's mane or this combination of the other real powerhouse popular mushrooms. So not to be ignored, shiitake and maitake, and especially if you are male. Really important one.
So let's dive in a little bit with shiitake and the research. There was this one study that was looking into the heart health benefits of shiitake mushroom by introducing the fruiting bodies of shiitake to the diet of rats with high cholesterol levels. So these rats were separated into 3 groups, and those nourished with a diet that was enriched with 5% shiitake mushroom fruiting bodies exhibited notable differences. So the shiitake infused regimen significantly reduced various indicators of cholesterol and lipids within the bloodstream, including total cholesterol, triglycerides, and LDL cholesterol, and more. So this study also unearthed another noteworthy discovery that rats on the mushroom-enriched diet, so with shiitake, excreted higher quantities of cholesterol and lipids through their feces. So this revelation could imply that integrating shiitake mushrooms into dietary habits, or as mushroom extracts like in those 2 blends that we mentioned, could potentially play a pivotal role in managing cholesterol and promoting cardiovascular well-being.
Such an easy thing to do. Like,
Such
just
an easy
put
thing.
some mushrooms on your plate. They're delicious. Learn how to cook them well and include them. And you're literally getting food as medicine, which we've known for so long. When we say food is medicine, this is such a great example of that. Put the shiitake on your plate.
Absolutely. So this other fact that I found from the research was particularly interesting to me because it's thought in research that one of the medicinal compounds found in the shiitake fruiting body is called mevanolin, and it's a compound thought to harbor cholesterol lowering properties. And so they found that so far this compound may influence the activity of HMG-CoA reductase, which is a crucial enzyme that is involved in cholesterol synthesis, and specifically with statins. Statins are involved in this pathway. So, I mean, there definitely has to be more research on this in terms of the exact mechanism and elucidating the exact dose and all of that. But the fact that shiitake could impact a pathway that is similar to a commonly prescribed pharmaceutical for cholesterol, so cool.
Don't tell the pharmaceutical companies. Turns out you can't patent a naturally occurring molecule. So shiitake gets to keep it and we get to eat it up.
Let's dive into oyster mushroom because we've talked a little bit about oyster mushroom with regards to ergothioneine, and ergothioneine is this compound that we can only receive from our foods. We need to eat sources of it to get it in our diet, and it's involved in a lot of metabolic pathways, and the research will continue to come in and explode in the years to come. But oyster mushroom is a source of ergothioneine. This one study found that oyster mushrooms was able to reduce cholesterol levels in the serum by 33% and cholesterol content in the liver by 20% after 12 weeks of consumption. Also remember, this is really important because we've talked a lot about how the health benefits for functional mushrooms are best seen with prolonged and consistent use. So 12 weeks. That doesn't mean that every single one needs to be taken for 12 weeks, but typically results are seen after a longer period of time.
Absolutely. And I can say at our house, before we developed the 6 mushroom blend, which is where we have oyster mushroom, Craig, my husband, had received some blood work where he was experiencing higher than normal cholesterol for him. So that led us to look into the research, and oyster mushroom comes up as this one that we hadn't worked with that has some evidence. So when we brought in our first rounds of looking through a supplier and trying to source organic certified high potency oyster mushroom extracts, we were using them at home for months before they became the product. And he was just taking oyster. I was putting that in his smoothie every morning for about 3 months, I would say. And lo and behold, his cholesterol levels did come down and have remained down. So it's something that you're not going to take it once, but tastes delicious. Oyster is another culinary delight. Again, we see it all over the place. We see it on the menus of restaurants everywhere as an alternative to meat. But when you receive it in an extract like in the blend, it's very mild tasting and so easy to hide if you have a man in your life that needs to have the mushrooms hidden. So putting it in a smoothie, stirring it into coffee, such an easy way to manage that cholesterol.
So in this study, they found that not only was the bad cholesterol or LDL cholesterol levels, they decreased, but oyster improved the levels of HDL cholesterol, so good cholesterol again, in the serum, resulting in increased excretion of LDL cholesterol from the body. So the underlying mechanisms of these actions is oyster's ability to decrease cholesterol absorption from the gut by about 16%, which is a similar mechanism in which some cholesterol lowering pharmaceutical drugs work. Oyster may also prevent the formation of atheroma plaques in the arteries. We talked about plaques earlier. So therefore, it could help to protect against the development of cardiovascular disease. And there was this other human clinical trial that studied the effects of oyster on 89 diabetic patients over a 24-day protocol. And they found that it also decreased systolic and diastolic blood pressure levels. It lowered plasma glucose levels, and it decreased levels of cholesterol and triglycerides in the serum. And additionally, in this study, they found that oyster mushroom did not have any negative impact on liver or kidney health in any of the participants. So a smaller sample, but significant results.
Yeah. And that's my favorite part. If it doesn't work for you, just stop taking it. There's no withdrawal symptoms. There are no side effects. There's no risk in trying something like that when it comes naturally. So amazing. I love that so much. Let's all take care of our hearts, right? Men, women, whoever you are. But I feel like when we look at that earlier onset of this heart disease, I know we have had some very unfortunate younger dads in our family lose their lives to heart conditions, and I'm going to guarantee they didn't know that adding something like mushrooms could have maybe extended their life.
And another thing too with functional mushrooms, they can help directly. I mean, I just listed a whole bunch of studies for how functional mushrooms in particular can impact cholesterol levels and this risk directly. But we also have to remember stress is a huge risk factor for cardiovascular disease. And oftentimes, I think I can speak very generally here that there are many men who are the breadwinners of the family and who they have a lot of stress to support their families.
Pressure to provide.
And so
we see you.
Yeah, the stress of that, I think, needs to be highlighted too, because oftentimes, I think generally speaking, again, that men maybe are not able to manage their stress in some ways. And so I talked about reishi, how reishi was found to mitigate some of these serum levels of cholesterol. But reishi is amazing for stress management as an adaptogen and supporting sleep. I had a member in my family, or have a member in my family, who did have a heart attack. And he had a heart attack during a period of time where he wasn't sleeping very much. He was working a significant amount of hours that is insane. And so that stress management piece, and also making sure that you are sleeping. Because think about if you have like a Whoop, or you have an Oura Ring, or you have something that tracks your biometrics, when you don't have a good sleep, your resting heart rate significantly increases, right? Your heart rate variability significantly decreases. I notice this myself, even when I'm not getting enough sleep. And if we're taking that reishi to support sleep and stress,
that
we can
indirect
also
support totally makes sense. It totally makes sense. Just get a great night's rest and start there, and let all of these other great things happen inside of you that you don't have to know about. You don't have to worry about. Desiree's going to worry about all of those mechanisms of action for us, but you can manage your sleep without even knowing what's happening inside of you when you get that rest. And that's such a great place to start. Such a great place. It always comes back to reishi as that starting point, right? The gateway mushroom. Let's dive into this second issue that comes up in men's health, and it's cancer. It's the C word. It's an uncomfortable thing to talk about, but we have to talk about it. We have to talk about it because, especially with men, cancer in men versus women, we see that men are more likely to be diagnosed with and die from cancer than women. And according to the National Cancer Institute, men have approximately a 1 in 2 chance of developing cancer in their lifetime. So think of 2 men that you know right now. One of them is going to develop cancer if this statistic holds true. And I hope that it doesn't. I hope that we're going to just start changing that. But, and that's true for me. If I think of all of the men that I know, cancer has shown up, and it can be just skin cancer, but we look at prostate cancer, lung cancer, in my family, colorectal cancer. And why are these things showing up? And the occurrence in women would be 1 in 3. So we're not far behind. As you know, I've had skin cancer, so I've taken it for us. I've got it. Check it off. I got one that, thank goodness, was the one that you want to have. But when we look at cancer and we look at the prevention for cancer and we think about why it's showing up more for men, I think about the screenings. So when, I was in a clinical trial when my cancer was detected. So it was found because I was receiving such great care. And I think sometimes men are not always seeking help. And an important man in my life waited years with some symptoms, with some signs that something was going wrong, waited years before looking for medical help, before asking questions that might have led to the diagnosis earlier where things wouldn't have been so difficult to manage. Early screening, I think, is so important, especially when it comes to things like colorectal cancer. I've had a colonoscopy. Yeah, they're not fun. But the peace of mind knowing that I can wait another few years, knowing that I'm not going to experience that same thing. We have to use that knowledge. We have to use that availability of the testing that we can do in our medical systems today. And then we have to think about prevention. I know it's a hard thing to talk about, especially as a naturopathic doctor. I know it's something that we want to be thinking of prevention. We don't want to be meeting people where they're at when they're so far along in a cancer journey that sometimes mushrooms, we needed to think of them sooner. But if you're okay with it, Dr. Des, talk to us about cancer and mushrooms and men.
The top 2 functional mushrooms with the most research on cancer are going to be turkey tail and reishi. There's a ton of research, especially coming out of Asia, just because they've used these functional mushrooms to treat cancer, or at least as concomitant therapy. So in addition to conventional medical cancer treatments, and they've used it extensively for a wide variety of different types of cancers. I think if we were to go into all of that, it would be hours and hours and hours.
A whole episode, perhaps.
Yeah, a whole episode, perhaps, in the future that may be to come, but something that we can highlight for the purpose of today's episode can be prostate cancer. We can also talk about BPH, benign prostatic hyperplasia, which is also known as enlargement of the prostate. And because that is unique to men, we don't have a prostate. There was one study that was published by the International Journal of Cancer that illustrated a possible connection between regular mushroom consumption and lower prostate cancer risk. So
just eat the mushrooms.
Just eat them, right? So, and this is really cool because first of all, if you're just eating culinary mushrooms or eating oyster mushroom or eating shiitake mushroom as part of your diet and part of your dinners and things like that, you're already helping to mitigate the risk. But then if you're taking mushroom extracts with high percentages of beneficial compounds, what does your risk look like now?
Like you're just upping your game. And all the men I know are all about upping their game. Yep. So eating it, I think, is so accessible to everyone. Mushrooms are inexpensive. Once you learn how to cook them, they're fairly easy to prepare. They taste delicious. Put them on the plate. You've got to eat anyway. When you're out at a restaurant, put those mushrooms put them in your order. But if you are somebody that, there's so many people that just tell us all the time, I can't eat them. It's the texture. And I think that this is why Eversio Wellness exists, because when we can concentrate them, when we can concentrate the beneficial compounds in them and offer them as a supplement in a capsule or in a powder that can be blended into things that we're consuming anyway. The men in my lives, they're all either drinking coffee or having a smoothie. And it's such an easy thing to add there. Yeah, for sure. These stats that we see when people are eating them are really getting increased when we have them as a concentrated extract.
Absolutely. So let's talk about it more. So men who consumed mushrooms in their diet 1 to 2 times per week and about 3 ounces per serving had an 8% lower risk of prostate cancer compared to those who ate no mushrooms at all. And men who ate mushrooms more than 3 times per week had a 17% lower risk. And this decrease in risk existed regardless of the individual intake of other fruits and vegetables, dairy, or meats in their diet. I think that's important to note too.
And 17% is huge. That is huge when we think about it being such a 2 to 3 times a week. Get that on your plate. I don't care if it's breakfast, lunch, or dinner. 17% is statistically significant.
There was this other study that focused on 40,000 Japanese men, and they found that there was an inverse relationship to exist between mushroom consumption and prostate cancer risk. So as the intake of mushrooms went up, the risk of prostate cancer went down. That's that inverse relationship. Let's also talk about maitake mushroom. Maitake mushroom, as we mentioned, is in 2 of our blends, the 4 mushroom blend and 6 mushroom blend. And so these beta glucans that were found in maitake were found to illustrate cytotoxic effects on prostate cancer cells and lead to their death. Essentially, they are going and killing the cancer cells. And they also found that these beta glucans from maitake were able to help sensitize cells to chemotherapy. And this may be especially helpful if it is a particular type of prostate cancer, which is hormone refractory prostate cancer that commonly has a poor efficacy from chemotherapy. So this essentially, the chemotherapy is not as effective on this particular type of prostate cancer. And they found that when they were consuming maitake extract, so having a high percentage of these beta glucans, which we talk about a lot, that they were sensitized.
Better together, enhancing those treatments. And I think we are seeing that. We are seeing, I know 2 men in my life that have been through cancer treatments and were prescribed mushrooms alongside the cancer treatment. So it's not like this is the cure and, oh, you have cancer, just take mushrooms. This is not what we're saying, but we're talking about using them as a complementary medicine to whatever is being offered to you to make it work for you the way it's supposed to. And in some cases, I have heard reduce the side effects of those really powerful drugs. Chemotherapy is not pretty. I'm sure everybody knows somebody who's been through it now, and it's something that we want to avoid if we can, but we don't always have that option. And if we can reduce the adverse effects of it, why not?
There was this other study that was published in the International Journal of Oncology, and that found that reishi was able to suppress the migration of prostate cancer cells and inhibit cell growth. So not only was it inhibiting the cells to get larger and multiply, but also preventing that migrations from the prostate to other areas of the body, which is extremely important. So that's just a little taste on how reishi as well can help to mitigate that.
Amazing. Okay. Let's just say goodbye to cancer in general. Goodbye, cancer. You are not welcome here. Go now. And that would bring us to diabetes. So one family member with type 2 diabetes and in my close circle, and actually being managed fairly well with food recently with so much information about how type 2 diabetes doesn't have to be lifelong if you're willing to really look at diet. But an interesting statistic about diabetes in men versus women is that men are at a higher risk of developing type 2 diabetes at a lower body mass index compared to women. So this was interesting. According to one study, men develop type 2 diabetes at a body mass index of around 31.83, whereas women typically develop the disease at a body mass index of around 33.69. So this means men are more susceptible to type 2 diabetes at lower levels of obesity, highlighting the need for really gender-specific strategies in diabetes prevention and management. So when we look at diabetes and its prevalence in so many people that struggle with obesity, but the fact that we see it coming to men faster is something that I do see in my circle. And I think it's such a interesting one because diabetes is so manageable when we think about the mechanism of action in so many mushrooms. And Dr. Des, you've talked about this in so many of the previous episodes. Diabetes comes up, metabolic health comes up all of the time, is insulin resistance and sensitivity. But give us the goods, give us a little recap for this purpose about how we're going to inspire these men in our lives to not be those recipients of that early onset type 2 diabetes.
Absolutely. So obviously there are some lifestyle things that can be done as well. Research showing that if you're going on just a light stroll after you consume a meal, you can actually help to decrease your blood glucose levels.
You mean don't eat and then lay on the couch?
Yeah.
What?
So just go for a light stroll. And the thing to keep in mind is it can't be this a walk outside that's inducing the stress response. We just want a casual stroll, and that can help to normalize your blood sugar levels as opposed to the spikes and the ups and downs.
So simple.
So simple.
Okay, so let's just walk through this So you eat dinner, you prepare dinner together with whoever you're eating with. If one of those people's a male, when the dinner is done, you get up together and do the dishes together. And when the dishes are done, you go for a walk together. So we're getting connection, we are managing our metabolic health, and we are reducing the risk of type 2 diabetes for both of us. That's such a great plan. Let's just implement that.
Absolutely, right? It's
You
the
know who I'm talking about.
It's the lifestyle things too, right? That can actually make some sort of a difference and also help with, like you said, with many different areas. So I will quickly highlight a couple studies, one on chaga and then a couple on reishi, because I think it's really important. So studies have shown that chaga extract has the potential to reduce fasting blood glucose levels, improve glucose tolerance, and improve insulin resistance. So remember that insulin resistance is when our cells are not sensitive to glucose levels or to insulin, and we want to make sure that the glucose is going into the cell as opposed to staying outside. And so chaga can help to activate pathways in the body that are required for normal metabolism in the body. And so imbalances of these pathways may lead to the development of type 2 diabetes and obesity. And there's one particular pathway, this AMPK pathway, that's particularly implicated, and metformin can actually act through the regulation of this AMPK pathway. Metformin is a very common pharmaceutical that is prescribed to help with insulin resistance. And this AMPK activation leads to increased glucose uptake into cells and improving insulin sensitivity. And so the fact that chaga was able to have some impact on this pathway was really promising and exciting. So two other studies I'm going to highlight on reishi. So there was this one human study. It was a multi-centered randomized control trial on reishi polysaccharides, so the medicinal compounds found in the fruiting body of reishi. There were 62 patients with type 2 diabetes. What they did was they took 1,800 milligrams 3 times per day. So that's 5,400 milligrams per day for 12 weeks. The outcome was that they experienced reduced hemoglobin A1C, as well as fasting and postprandial plasma glucose levels. So
amazing.
So their glucose levels were lower when they were fasting, as well as after a meal, postprandial. So in one capsule of Chill Now, our reishi capsules, you're getting 3,750 milligrams quantity crude equivalent of our dual extracted reishi. And in this study, they were examining 5,400 milligrams.
Okay, so 2 of our reishi capsules, 7,500 milligrams. 2 is enough to be more than what was given in this study.
Correct.
And according to Health Canada, you could take up to 4 of our reishi capsules because Health Canada's maximum acceptable dose of reishi is 15,000 milligrams. So this isn't even the max dose, and we're seeing these massively efficacious results. That's super promising.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one other human study, it was a randomized double-blind placebo-controlled study on reishi extract. And there were 46 patients with type 2 diabetes. They were taking 3,000 milligrams for 12 weeks. So again, the same time frame, but a little bit lower of a dose than in this other study. And in the outcome, they found that the plasma glucose area under the curve during a meal tolerance test was reduced more with reishi extract in comparison to placebo. So I thought that was really cool that they're examining different doses. And of course, we know that their different doses work for each individual person. And that's where it's important to trial that out for yourself.
Absolutely. I love it. All right. After diabetes, when I think again about these men in my life, respiratory disease comes up because of COPD, which is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. And when it comes to respiratory diseases in men versus women, men are more likely to die from COPD than women. So according to the World Health Organization, the global death rate from COPD is 1.5 times higher in men than women. And when we wonder why, and this is very apparent in my family, it may be influenced by higher rates of smoking and occupational exposures among men. So COPD is a condition in the lung airways where they become inflamed and narrowed and the air sacs become damaged, major cause of morbidity and mortality around the globe. And it's estimated that by 2030, COPD will be one of the top causes of death worldwide.
Wow.
So, and because tobacco smoke is one of the most common causes of COPD, we look at that, but it's estimated that 20% of people who develop COPD have never even smoked. So what the heck are we inhaling into our lungs? What the heck? I see you, teenage boys. I see you. When we look at the world around us, just in our neighborhood, walking down the sidewalk, we see these plumes of smoke starting to be more prevalent, and gone are the times of James Dean smoking that cigarette and looking cool in a time when it was actually thought about as health benefit was to smoke to reduce stress. And the tobacco leaf it's a plant, and it was this healthy thing. And here we are in this world where we see vaping becoming so normalized. And like, let's be honest, I've read the research, and there are thousands of chemicals when you are vaping, and some of them are unrecognizable. We do the research, we look at all of the 1,000 chemicals that show up in the juice of a vape pen, and we don't even know what some of them are. Like, that is horrifying to me, to not know what we're inhaling, but we do know how it's showing up. And we just think about how this is so beyond the secondhand smoke worries of my time. Right?
Absolutely.
That was the concern for me. Oh, secondhand smoke. Like, I'm not a smoker, never was, never will be. But I was, of course, I went dancing in my 20s. We were around secondhand smoke as kids. There were lots of adults, mostly the men in my life, who were smoking. And I worried about that. But now we have to worry about all of these other exposures in our environment, and the things that are being created by incredible marketing companies that want the money of this younger generation. And I think when we talk about respiratory health in men, it's a real trigger for so many people.
Absolutely. Think about the difference in generations too. I mean, smoking used to be seen as something that was good for you, and doctors were prescribing people to smoke cigarettes, right? And that, I think, is another episode that where we could go off on a tangent there. But then from there, there's our generations where people smoke significantly less, because now we know the harms of it on our lungs. And we see in terms of advertising how cigarette companies are having to change the packaging and putting the warning stuff on there. And now we have this new generation of younger people who are vaping, right? Because, it's not as...
it's better for you. This is how it's advertised. It's better for you than smoking.
It smells better when you're around it with all these fruity flavors, and it's not as hard to be around per se as, say, cigarette smoking is. However, I'm a little scared for the generation,
like, what's gonna happen?
The generations to come, of what are going to be the effects of vaping and all of these things. And so, it is more prevalent, absolutely, in men and young men. Yeah. And so respiratory health is a concern too.
It is. And I think we're going to talk about respiratory health, and for sure there's mushrooms for that. But the bigger part of it for me is the addiction piece. And when we look at the past and we look at the smokers of the past, I remember people in my family trying to quit through my younger years and being so interested in, like, why don't they just stop? Just stop it. Just stop it. Don't do it anymore. Just make that choice. And obviously it's not that easy, because we're dealing with the brain here. Yeah. And addiction is a beast. And when we look at the addiction to the nicotine from the old school cigarettes versus the addiction to what's being offered today, it's night and day. The concentration of nicotine in these products is impossible for kids to not become addicted to. And again, I know young men in my life that started vaping because we think it's cool, and they want to quit now and they can't, and they've not been doing it very long, but they are putting so much of the addictive substances in here because they want a customer for life, and they're getting it. And how long will these lives be? So I'm following the research quite closely to see, when do we predict we're going to start to see the effects of this new generation of people inhaling things into their lungs that were never designed to go in there. Your lungs were not designed to process things going in other than the air that we breathe. So let's talk about how mushrooms can help us. Obviously, prevention is quit smoking. Let's just state that. If you're smoking, we see you, we got it. We love many people who smoke, but if you can quit, if that's an option for you, that would be first. avoiding exposure to other pollutants. So again, we talked about air quality in previous episodes. Not all of us can change where we live, and air quality is different where you are, but being mindful of it and thinking about air filtration and when you're outside and when you're not. And then managing these chronic conditions with some type of, let's just do what we can. If you have to keep smoking, are you doing something to counteract those effects? So give us the goods. Let's talk about mushrooms.
Yeah, so with respect to respiratory health, there is one functional mushroom that comes to mind based on the research, and that is cordyceps. There's research on cordyceps for supporting exercise performance and increasing VO2 max and all of those things, as well as asthma. Something that's particularly interesting from the research is goblet cell hyperplasia. Goblet cells produce mucus in our airways. So for example, if you are somebody that is asthmatic, you may potentially have goblet cell hyperplasia, where you have this overproduction of mucus. Asthmatics will often say if they go outside for a run or something like that, they have this overproduction of mucus, and it feels like it's always, stuck in their throat, as well as the increase in inflammatory cytokines and inflammatory cells. So cordyceps was shown to decrease serum levels of pro-inflammatory molecules like IgE, which is the primary contributor to the development of allergic airway inflammation following a trigger. So the polysaccharides that are extracted from cordyceps, so a cordyceps extract, also assisted in preventing goblet cell hyperplasia. So I mentioned goblet cell hyperplasia. It's an increase in the number of goblet cells in the airways. That's that hyperplasia piece. And it's a feature of asthma and other respiratory diseases that results in overproduction of mucus and therefore can contribute to airflow obstruction. So cordyceps also was able to illustrate the ability to inhibit the activation of a particular pathway called the TGF-B1 SMAD pathway. And activation
Cool name. Put that on a shirt.
Right? The activation of this pathway is correlated with a more severe disease process because it results in the presence of greater inflammatory cells and increased restructuring processes in conditions like asthma and other respiratory conditions. So
is this where we see all of the coughing? Like, I don't know a smoker who's not coughing more than the non-smokers in their life. And I'm just, as you're describing it, like I literally, I could feel my throat. I feel the appreciation that I don't have that. And in the past, if I've had a cold or something, that feeling of restriction in the throat would be why we hear that smokers cough, why we hear all the kids in the vape pit at the high schools hacking up a lung. That irritation is so uncomfortable. That's so cool that cordyceps is the mushroom that goes right to that acts in that area.
Absolutely. And it's really cool too to hear from people in our community who have respiratory diseases and will say, I've limited the amount of inhaler use just because I don't need it as much with cordyceps. In a previous episode, I shared my personal story. I have had exercise-induced asthma since I was very young, and with taking cordyceps extract daily, I don't have to use my inhalers at all anymore when exercising. So it's really cool just how cordyceps can help with that and help with your lung capacity and being able to breathe and all of those things.
Yeah, we get that review quite a bit. We get these
quite
people
often,
who are, I love that people are willing to try it. But the fact that they report back to us when it's a success, thank you for letting us know that it's not just us, and it's not just that it happened in the research, in that trial, in that small group. Like, this is happening for real people that have relied on an inhaler, which we never want to have to rely on something for life if we can naturally give our body what it needs preventatively. So I love that. All right. Number 5. Let's talk about reproductive health. And I'm going to say a word that's not in the dictionary, and it's Sperm Ageddon. This really came up a few years ago now. I think it was 2017. But Sperm Ageddon is a term used to describe the alarming decline in sperm counts and male fertility observed over recent decades. So it's a phenomenon that's been given a lot of attention from research and on social media, in the press. because it's fascinating that we see researchers and healthcare professionals and the general public really wondering about the potential implications for population health in future generations if Sperm Ageddon actually is a thing. So a 2017 study published in the Journal of Human Reproduction Update reported a significant decline in sperm counts among men in Western countries, an average drop of over 50% between 1973 and 2011.
Wow.
50% drop in sperm count between 1973 and 2011. Let that register for you. Something is going on. The concern is that if this trend continues, it could have severe implications for male fertility. So declining sperm counts can make it more challenging for couples to conceive, obviously. We do see a rise in things like in vitro fertilization, which can help to address some of those issues. So we do have this, oh, it's not a big deal because we can address it this way. However, just like most awesome things in the world of modern Western medicine, these technologies are definitely not accessible to everyone because they're so incredibly expensive and they're not available everywhere. It's not like you can just pop into your doctor's office and get IVF these days. So we see people, especially on social media, sharing their stories around IVF, and it's not pretty and it's not easy and it's not cheap. So if there's something that we can do to address the Sperm Ageddon, the pending decline in sperm counts, it would be cool. And there's a mushroom for that.
Absolutely. Okay, so with talking about sexual health for men, we can talk about that infertility piece, but before we get into that, I also do want to mention BPH because it is something that men are commonly dealing with. BPH is called benign prostatic hyperplasia. I mentioned this earlier in the episode. This is enlargement of the prostate. So enlargement of the prostate may cause urinary tract symptoms. So for example, frequent urination, or symptoms that are related to the loss of functioning of the testes, perhaps even erectile dysfunction and symptoms and signs associated with that. So one study found that cordyceps fruiting body extract was found to improve the signs and symptoms of BPH. So they found that it was able to increase androgen levels, so testosterone, by suppressing its breakdown or enhancing its secretion of testicular cells if they were androgen deplete. Very interesting. So instances of androgen imbalance, cordyceps helped to maintain androgen levels and inhibit prostate hypertrophy, so the enlargement of the prostate, assisting in the treatment or prevention of BPH in aging males. Research has shown that it's been able to help improve sperm quality as well as sperm health. We've talked about cordyceps previously in an episode where we mentioned that cordyceps can help with hormone imbalance, and it's because research has shown that it's been able to impact the HPA axis, so hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, in both men and women, right? So this is important for men, making sure that their hormone levels are healthy for them. So cordyceps may enhance mitochondrial activity, so therefore increasing energy production. This is really important, especially with the mitochondria. It's extremely important, and as well as modulating the immune system and exerting antioxidant effects. But specifically, there was this one clinical trial examining cordyceps, and there were 22 men that received cordyceps extract over 8 weeks. This is cool.
I love this one.
They found that there was a 33% increase in sperm count, a 29% reduction in sperm abnormalities, and a 79% rise in sperm survival rates. And they reported that there was an improvement in sexual desire by 66%. Sexual desire is also extremely important for infertility. That often gets overlooked.
Yeah. How many close friends of ours right now either just had babies or are pregnant and are the people in our lives that never miss a day of cordyceps? And they're not just taking it, they're giving it to their husbands. I think this is the game changer. 79% increase in survival rates. So often we hear about the fact that, no, your sperm count is fine. Your sperm count is fine. But are the sperm surviving long enough to meet the egg and do the job that they're there to do? And I think so many times this infertility issue becomes a female issue, right? So many times the infertility challenges, the burden and the complexity of them is disproportionately felt by women. But this is about sperm. This is
about sperm.
This is about men.
This
I
is
love
about
it.
men. And so I'm going to highlight 2 more studies, and they are rat studies. And I think it's important too. So this one rat study, they had 4 groups. So group 1, healthy rats. Group 2, healthy rats that were treated with cordyceps. Group 3, diabetic rats that were untreated. You might be thinking, why diabetic rats? Group 4, diabetic rats that were treated with cordyceps. They were given cordyceps for 21 days. They measured their body weight, their blood glucose levels, food intake, epididymal sperm parameter, sexual behavior, serum testosterone levels, and antioxidant parameters. And they found that group 4, which were the diabetic rats that were treated with cordyceps, significantly improved the epididymal sperm parameter as well as serum testosterone level. And in turn, their copulatory behavior increased as well. So their libido, their sexual activity improved. And they also had significantly improved glutathione levels. And glutathione is a master antioxidant in our body. So it's important to remember that sometimes there are conditions that are related and can lead to downstream effects or byproducts or risks for things. Another one on reishi. So reishi we've talked about for both men and women for fertility. So this study examined middle-aged male mice, and reishi administration resulted in increased levels of serum testosterone, cell proliferation, and sperm-specific lactate dehydrogenase, while the levels of age-related protein cellular death were decreased. So there have been links to male fertility in these specific LDHC4 defects, along with other factors. So LDHC4 is found in mammalian mature testes and spermatozoa, so for example, humans. Defects in this catalytic activity of LDHC4 are key to pathophysiological abnormalities that underlie infertility. Recent studies have also implicated this LDHC4 as cancer testes antigen, owing to its aberrant transcription in a broad spectrum of human neoplasms. So essentially what that means...
Tell us in English, Dr. Des.
So in English, essentially, it was able to help with this LDHC4, because when there are defects in this, that has been linked to infertility or to prostate cancer. And so it was able to help.
It's the root cause.
Yeah, it could potentially be a root cause. So just how it can overall impact a mechanism of action. And they found that the group treated with reishi had improvements in testicular function and structure.
So if I'm in a relationship with someone, we are trying to propagate the species. We want to be giving our men cordyceps in the morning and reishi at night. And they'll feel great.
Might be a great idea.
They'll feel great, and they'll be doing something to improve their chances. So interesting. Okay, let's dive into mental health. So the last thing we're going to touch on, saving the best for last, for sure, because the shocking statistic about men versus women is that men are almost 4 times more likely to die by suicide than women. And this is the really heartbreaking stuff. According to the World Health Organization, that stat comes with it. We see a significant disparity highlighting this critical need for targeted mental health support and interventions for men. So when we look at the Center for Disease Control stats, men accounted for 79% of all suicide deaths in 2020, and the highest rates observed in middle-aged white men. And it's, to me, when we look at what's going on, men are just less likely to seek help for mental health issues due to the stigma and the societal expectations on them. And I see this. I see this in the men around us who have been either raised or conditioned in whatever way, or running a program where pushing their feelings down and pushing on and being part of the grind and the expectation is the reality. So of course, both men and women experience mental health issues, but it's just that women are more likely to seek help, to talk to a friend, to show their emotions and not be embarrassed by conditions like depression and anxiety. So we see substance abuse showing up. We see these mental health conditions just related to what's going on for men that's not being dealt with. And I know we've got lots of research that shows how functional mushrooms can help us with some mood issues and some hormone balancing that might be related. But I just want to talk about an initiative from right here in British Columbia called Heads Up Guys. So this is an initiative aimed at raising awareness and providing resources to support very specifically men's mental health. It's called Heads Up Guys. And it was developed by the University of British Columbia right here in Canada, specifically through the Men's Depression and Suicide Network within the university's Faculty of Medicine. And Heads Up Guys plays a crucial role in addressing the mental health crisis among men. So because they are unlikely to seek help for mental health, we see this issue where they feel like they should be self-reliant, like they shouldn't have to ask for help. And what this does, Heads Up Guys, is provides targeted resources, support, and education that helps men to recognize the importance of mental health, to seek help when they need it, and to build healthier, more resilient lives. So this is a place for education and information. On that website, there's a self-check tool. There are practical tips there. There's a huge directory of resources. And there's a general feeling of an encouragement for men to seek help there. And it's just a super easy thing to pass on to someone. If you know a man dealing with mental health, Heads Up Guys is just found at headsupguys.org. O-R-G, and I highly encourage you to go and seek that out. And Des will tell you why you should also take your mushrooms.
I think the biggest thing with men is that there's this stigma that whether it's talking about your feelings or not having other groups of men where they feel like it's a safe space to talk about that. And I think as women, it's really important that we show up as allies for men who are struggling with their mental health or stress. That's totally normal. You are human. And to be a safe space for those men in our lives, because it's really important that there is no shame, there's no judgment in struggling or in needing to seek support for your health, whether it's mental health or any of these other things.
And we are all in this together.
Yeah, absolutely. It's part of the human experience. And functional mushrooms can be really helpful just to support and upgrade your daily life. If you're somebody that is struggling with stress management, taking reishi can be extremely helpful, or taking cordyceps can be helpful, because they are both adaptogens helping our body to physiologically deal with stress. If we feel like we're struggling to wake up and have energy, or maybe even if we're depressed and we're struggling with energy, taking cordyceps to help with energy production, in addition to taking functional mushrooms like lion's mane or reishi to help support those mood related symptoms. So functional mushrooms are just an upgrade where you can add the blends to your coffee. It doesn't have to be this big, sexy, crazy routine that has to be a lot of work. They're meant to be small little additions to up level a habit you already do or stack it. So, you know, if you're somebody, for example, who you do need some support with sleep because you feel like you're not getting quality sleep or you don't feel well rested in the morning, well, then maybe putting that bottle of reishi on your nightstand will help you to take it in the evening, as opposed to in your supplement cupboard, or
as opposed to smoking weed to fall asleep, like we see the younger generation literally offering to each other as advice. Oh, I can't sleep at night, so I smoke a little weed. We're not saying anything about cannabis consumption, totally a personal choice, but we can see clearly the evidence in neuroscience that you're not getting great sleep when you fall asleep using that tool. Reishi would be such a healthier option for you if you are looking for ways to help with sleep. And I love those two options right there, because I just spent some time with a group of guys that were doing a construction project together, and some of them were consuming like 17 cups of coffee to function through the day. And I'm not even kidding you. They're looking for energy. So when we can start to, you don't have to stop drinking coffee, but can we reduce that and then bring in cordyceps for energy as a healthier option for all systems of the body? And then in the evening, instead of looking to a sleeping pill or a ton of melatonin or smoking weed to fall asleep, can we use reishi sometimes or reishi all the time? So just helping to upgrade the habits that you already have and look for a healthier alternative when you can, to bring yourself into the life that you deserve so that you can show up as the man that you want to be regardless of your age.
Absolutely. And this is a popular question we get asked all the time, and the answer is yes. And I'm sure you're going to guess the question is, can men take functional mushrooms too? Because we often talk about it for women because
we are women.
Because we are women, but also women, as Brandi mentioned earlier, in terms of going to the doctor and following up on a health concern or a symptom that they're worried about or curious about. Women are more more likely to do that than men, and women are more likely to be outspoken in comparison to men. And so functional mushrooms can be taken by men or women, and we're highlighting particular studies. And we've talked a lot about functional mushrooms for supporting women and their hormones. So just because a woman is taking functional mushrooms to support their hormone levels doesn't mean that you cannot take it as a male. Mushrooms have this intelligence, and researchers have not elucidated the exact mechanism for all of the things because, as we mentioned earlier, the pharmaceutical industry is funding a lot of the research, and a lot of natural therapies don't have as extensive of research or clinical trials as something like pharmaceutical industry. And that's a whole other topic, and we've talked about it before too, right? But functional mushrooms can be used by men.
Yes.
It's that mushroom intelligence. They are modulators.
Working totally differently in me than they are in you, than they are in my son, my husband, or my father, because of that beautiful mushroom intelligence. We share 50% of our DNA with mushrooms. Of course, they're going to do something great for the DNA that you've got. And I love what you just said about men don't always speak up about it and talk about it. So I think that brings us to the end of our episode where we love to share a review. And interestingly, when we go looking for a new review to share, we have thousands of reviews on products on the website, thousands of 5-star reviews. It's such a beautiful thing for us to be able to read. But we had to scroll a little bit. It was interesting. We weren't expecting this, to find the reviews left by men versus women, because women love to share. We like, if you didn't notice, we love to chug a lot. I know men that do as well, but we do have quite a few reviews from men on cordyceps. So I chose that one today. So I'm going to share a review from Ryan from right here in Canada, 5-star review on our Energize Now cordyceps capsules. And he called it NRG, energy. And his review is short and sweet. Wow, what a difference. No more afternoon crash and just steady all day energy. Really happy I tried this. So we're really happy you tried it too. And hopefully that no afternoon crash means that we're not having a ton of coffee in the afternoon, which would be affecting our sleep. So thank you, Ryan, for being a brave man to share your review on our website.
Yeah, and my review is coming from Fraser, who also gave a 5-star review. I love his title of the review, The Chillest. This is on Chill Now Reishi capsules. So he goes, I've had insomnia for the last 15 years. I have tried everything under the sun. I have been using Chill Now for 2 weeks. After supper, I take 2 capsules, and I have found this product has helped to calm my mind, and I have been having great sleeps. Amazing. I love that.
So thank you for tuning into this one to share a little extra love with the men in your life. We hope that if you learned something new, you will share it with them. Share it with a man that you love, and that will just make our day. We'll see you next time, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.